I'm Tamron Hall. The News Nation is following breaking news. Will Republicans follow through on a threat to hold up John Brennan's nomination to be the new CIA director? In the next 30 minutes, the Senate Intelligence Committee is expected to vote on Brennan's nomination. But Senators John McCain and Lindsey Graham are vowing to, quote, stop the nomination in the full Senate unless they receive more information from the White House on the attacks in Benghazi.
John and I are hell-bent on making sure the American people understand this debacle called Benghazi.
I've had questions, written questions from Mr. Brennan for nearly 3 weeks now. We've not received a single answer. I think that we deserve at least an answer to those questions, and I have some questions about torture.
I'm not going to vote on a new CIA director until I find out what the CIA did in Benghazi.
And joining me now, our News Nation political panel, Democratic strategist Chris Kofinas and Carrie Budoff-Brown, White House reporter for Politico. Thank you both for joining us. Carrie, part of this laundry list of questions Senators McCain, Graham, and Ayotte say they have that have been unanswered is they want to know why, on the anniversary of the worst terrorist attack in American history, this is a quote from their letter, after multiple attacks last year on the U.S. and Western interests in Libya, and with rising insecurity in countries across the Middle East, U.S. military units and assets in the region were not ready, alert, and positioned to respond in a timely fashion. That is just one on a long list from these senators here of questions they say they've not had answered. And here we are again with a nomination that could potentially be delayed even further.
Yeah, it's not clear at this point whether what the administration has provided on Benghazi is enough for these senators to stand down and say and pull back from what, as you just showed the clip, Lindsey Graham saying he's hell-bent on getting more answers, or else, you know, he won't move forward with the confirmation. It's unclear yet whether it's going to be enough. Certainly on the drone memos, it would seem to be enough to get the Democrats, who have said that they wanted to see those memos. We still haven't heard for sure, but this is clearly an attempt by the administration to push along Brennan's confirmation.
Chris, you know, it's interesting. Carrie said, you know, is it enough? And that question after the Chuck Hagel situation, where it turns into a loss for Republicans because after all the time spent that could have perhaps been focused on other issues, his nomination went through. When is it ever going to be enough with Benghazi for these three senators?
I don't think it's ever going to be enough. I mean, the part that I would say that is perplexing is, so Senator Kerry, when he was confirmed as Secretary of State, did not face these kind of questions.
Exactly.
When he was going to be Secretary of State, they hit, you know, Senator Hagel very hard on Benghazi. Then they confirmed him, and now it's John Brennan's turn. So it's kind of
you cannot forget that then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton as well testified. I mean, there's been a laundry list of people, and I think fairly put, there have been and are legitimate questions here. But this ongoing threat of holding up nominations for individuals, people thought Brennan would take heat on enhanced interrogation techniques, i.e. torture, according to some, as opposed to what happened in Libya, something he had nothing to do with, as well as Chuck Hagel.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think it's fine to advise and consent. That is the Senate's role. Right. But for Senator McCain and the others, it's become more about irritate and obstruct. And at some point, this becomes a dangerous situation when you have a serious number of threats the country is facing, whether it's the growing threat of al-Qaeda in Africa, instability in the Middle East, Iran. And so the question becomes, when is enough is enough? And it doesn't seem that there's anything the administration could say that's going to pacify Senator McCain and Senator Graham and others.
And speaking of what the administration is saying, Carrie, let me play what Jay Carney said on this issue just within the past hour.
We have been enormously cooperative with Congress on the issue of Benghazi. Hours and hours of testimony, including the Secretary of State, 10,000 pages of documents, I believe, numerous hearings, and working with members on their concerns with regards to these nominations. But again, our nominees ought to be considered on their qualifications.
Carrie, if it is effective strategy to threaten to hold up Brennan here, how do the Republicans allow it to pay off? What I'm saying is, again, back to Chuck Hagel, after all the wrangling, all of the drama, he ends up confirmed. Does the Brennan situation end in the same way?
I think that's seems to be what most people even acknowledge, on the Hill among Republicans, that, John Brennan, on the merits, he seems to be, on his way to confirmation. It's just a matter of when and what Republicans are able to get out of the administration before then. I mean, this is something that the Hill often does. They'll hold up nominations. They'll put holds on judges and others, trying to get the administration to do something.
But what we saw with Hagel was extraordinary. It was unprecedented. So while we see these delays, not to this degree, right?
Well, no, you're exactly right. This is to a new level and something that Democrats, I think, the shoes on the other foot, if there's a Republican president, I think this is setting a precedent where you're going to see Democrats doing the same thing for a Republican, to a Republican president and his nominees. And that's, I think, what folks are sort of warning about, that the precedent has set is one that, in the long term could be pretty damaging to the institution.
And Carrie, it's the same senators, McCain, Graham, Ayotte, and we may also, with his new approval numbers out in the state of Texas, Senator Cruz may also delve in this. I think he's got a 39% approval rating in his state, which is good for him at this point, or decent for him.
I mean, exactly. This is something that, members of Congress do. Again, like you said, doing it on a nominee is something more unusual. But, in the view of Lindsey Graham and John McCain, they have serious questions. They've struggled to get information out of the administration to the extent that they want it. And, of course, like Chris says, that goalpost may be moved several times. But in their view, they're exercising their right as members of Congress.
And speaking of exercising rights, I want to read again Dianne Feinstein's latest statement on the drone program and the questions that she and others have regarding that. She says, I've reached an agreement with the White House to provide the committee access to all Justice Department Office of Legal Counsel opinions related to the targeted killings of Americans in a way that allows members to fulfill their oversight responsibilities. So at least Senator Feinstein, Chris, says regarding the drone program and some of these documents she'd like to see, she's satisfied at least at this point, but there are questions that linger on with that. But if you were a betting man and looking back, I'm sure you would have expected Brennan to be getting more questions on enhanced interrogations during the Bush years and his role as opposed to maybe Benghazi.
Well, listen, it's fine, I think, for senators to have questions that they want answered, especially, when you're talking about a national security position that has been, and Mr. Brennan's been involved in an array of, serious issues and challenges that have faced the country. So I think that's fine. I think where it becomes problematic is what we're seeing from Senator McCain and Senator Graham, which is a litany of unending questions where no matter what answers or informations are provided, it doesn't matter. It's not enough.
And no matter who answers the question, because again, to point out, this hasn't stopped at one person's door.
Right, and I think the question then becomes, what is the real end game here? And I don't think this is about holding up Brennan. I mean, at the end of the day, he's going to get confirmed, whether it's in a week or 2 weeks or whatever it might be. This really is, I think, a shot across the bow in terms of the president and how he conducts his foreign policy. And I think that is the troubling part about it, because I think Senator McCain hasn't come to terms with the fact that he's not the president. And the president, as commander-in-chief, has the role and responsibility and the power to decide what the foreign policy is for the country, and Senator McCain clearly has a different vision of this. So this is the game that they're playing. This is trying to box, the president in. I just don't think it's a smart strategy, and I don't think it's something that's going to win over a lot of support amongst the American people.
Chris Kofinas, thank you. Carrie Budoff-Brown, thank you as well. Great pleasure having you both on. And we have more breaking news out of Washington, whereas a massive winter storm could add to the turmoil on the Capitol, already generated by a wave of political storms. Several high-profile House votes and hearings could be affected. The approaching storm could delay a House vote on a Republican plan to avert a government shutdown, but a bipartisan deal on gun control legislation announced just yesterday is still so far on track to go before the Senate Judiciary Committee. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Luke Russell. So, Luke, I'm talking about a massive storm, Mother Nature, and Politico, this beautiful view of Washington, D.C., but later tonight into tomorrow, we very well may see a different picture coming out of D.C.
That's right, Tamron. You're going to see possibly the House of Representatives could be delayed because of the snowstorm. It all depends on whether or not there'd be a federal government shutdown, but that is not to be determined quite yet. We don't know if it's going to be real snow, wintry mix. It is rather late here in March, rather early in March for it to be anything totally substantial. But I'm not a meteorologist. I'm more of a political commentator.
And we have a meteorologist coming up, so don't
worry. Right.
So,
but the main issue of interest this week on Capitol Hill is there is real movement on the issue of guns and possible movements in gun control, specifically the idea of trying to get stiffer penalties for straw purchases. Those are the purchases made by somebody for somebody else who does not pass a background check. Legislation has moved before the Senate Judiciary Committee on that. You're possibly going to see that come up on Thursday, barring the fact that there could be snow. But if there's no snow, you would see a bipartisan vote out of the Senate Judiciary Committee from a bill that's sponsored by Republicans and Democrats. Mark Kirk from Illinois, Susan Collins of Maine, Kristen Gillibrand, and Dick Durbin on the Democratic side. That would make it a federal crime for straw purchasers. That would charge also the purchaser and the seller. And our own Casey.
This is a test of the Texas Emergency Alert System. In the event of an emergency, this system would bring you important information. This test is now concluded.
In the New York area were targeted by an individual who was not able to purchase guns, but police allege his neighbor had bought some of the guns used in that attack. So we have recent big news involving these so-called straw purchases.
Absolutely, and it's a significant issue that you routinely hear of when sheriffs and police officers come on Capitol Hill. It's something they talk about, and it's actually something that both parties can get behind. Why, Tamron? It plays to that sort of enforcing law that Republicans like to talk about when it comes to gun issues, and for Democrats, they say it just obviously makes sense. It gives us an ability to really try and increase the penalties on folks who are using these weapons improperly.
All right, Luke Russer, thank you so much for your time. Greatly appreciate it, buddy. Coming up, more on that massive storm moving from the Midwest headed east. In fact, these are live pictures from Chicago, where more than 1,300 flights have already been canceled. The wet weather then expected to march east and could bring power outages. We'll have the very latest. Plus, the conservative website, The Daily Caller, sticking by its report accusing New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez of hiring an escort, despite a brand new Washington Post piece in which the woman identified as the escort reportedly says she was paid to lie. Menendez says it's just a right-wing blog trying to smear him. Well, one of the writers at the heart of this,